What if someone told you that the United States is actually profiteering out of the war in Ukraine and the global upheaval that the conflict has triggered? For starters, it wouldn't be an unbelievable assertion because the dollar is suddenly very strong, American banks are earning a fortune, US weapons inventories have been drained, creating the need for the military industrial complex to replenish them immediately, and above all, Europe is suddenly very dependent on the United States. The United States is now the only world power that has a massive influence over Europe. When looked at from this perspective, the war in Ukraine and the resultant global upheaval has actually benefited Washington in more ways than can be described. Consider this. Russian gas and oil exports did not allow the entry of American energy giants in Europe. Washington was no match for Russia when it came to supplying fuel to Europe. However, after the war in Ukraine broke out, the US made Europe abandon Russian energy and instead fitted its own supplies in European markets. The USA's energy domination was further solidified with the sabotage of the Nord Stream gas pipelines, which was possibly carried out with the intention of crippling Moscow's ability to push its gas into Europe forever. Meanwhile, the United States of America is looking at ways to make more energy available for itself. It has allowed energy giant Chevron to rig oil from Venezuela and increase crude supplies after banning Russia's oil imports. American banks, meanwhile, are having a time of their life. It's an open season of interest hikes in the United States. The Fed continues to jack up interest rates with the aim of taming inflation, but its attempts are bearing little fruit. US banks, though, are pretty happy with the huge interest rates. In September, the Federal Reserve hiked rates by 75 basis points, marking the fifth rate hike of the year. By the end of this year, the Fed is expected to further raise interest rates by 120 basis points. JP Morgan has made an interesting revelation. It said US banks are not giving better rates on deposits, nor have they reduced interest rates for consumer loans. Barclays banking analyst Jason Goldberg said that 20 US banks will bloat by huge interest income in the next quarter. Chris Kotowski, an analyst at Oppenheimer in New York, said the US banks' interest income could even beat the Wall Street's expectations. Meanwhile, the military-industrial complex of the United States is jubilant with the war in Ukraine. The US has supplied Ukraine weapon systems worth several billions of dollars. Mind you, Ukraine has not paid for these systems. Instead, Washington has supplied the war-torn nation with weapons from its own reserves. But those reserves need to be replenished soon, and defense manufacturers are beginning to smell some big cash coming their way as Washington looks to make up for the loss in inventories by placing fresh orders. Besides, the US has approved a potential sale of $1.1 billion in weapons to Taiwan. US arms sales to European nations and partners bounced back with a total of about $50 billion in sales cases cleared in fiscal 2022. This is a big jump from the total of about $35 billion last year. Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the ongoing conflict has helped spur a greater demand for US weapons, particularly from European nations. On the 3rd of August, US cleared possible foreign military sales to Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates worth more than $3 billion. Poland has also been assured of weapons by Washington. Meanwhile, investors are betting on the dollar and high interest rates are working wonders for the American currency. All in all, the American military-industrial complex is having fun even as ordinary citizens continue to suffer due to inflation. The question is, did the United States know a war in Ukraine would benefit it in